Everybody again, and we'll start our meeting back up. We have Jennifer Holler with us and Gus Seelick from VHCB, and they're with us this morning to discuss farm labor housing and housing in general on farms. And I guess, Gus, we back a week or two or three ago, we had Dan Baker in from UVM and Buster Caswell, I think. And yep. I don't know if you received any of the information that Dan presented to us on their research and follow-up from his research. But what it showed the committee was that we're really slacking on farm labor housing. Overcrowdedness, some poor conditions, and like he has the numbers, and so we dug into that a little more and found that there's USDA has a federal program that has two or three different sections or segments to it. And Michael O'Grady, our council person, has done some research on that. And I guess what we wanted to chat with you about is, because you're the guy that does the housing stuff and actually has a couple of dollars to do it with. If we could put something together on a trial basis, maybe, or something to try to move into that area to some degree to get some of this farm labor housing updated and have it so it's presentable. So when we bring immigrants in, or these foreign workers, that at least they have a decent place to be able to live while they're here. So I don't know if you folks have thought about that, Gus. I bet you have, and get your take on it.
So I'm familiar, but not intimately familiar with Dan's research, and this is a longstanding issue, and I really think goes to a broader issue of how Vermont manages quality in housing and enforces codes generally. And I think there's discussion of that going on in the State House as well, and has been for quite a number of years. From our perspective, what we did, and I actually had a meeting with Secretary Tebbetts and his team on this issue a couple weeks ago. Last year we commissioned a report on farm labor housing. We're expecting it in mid-April. A fellow named John Ryan, an associate of his, has been working on it, and Dan's research is part of his report. So I don't have the report yet. I had a preliminary discussion with John about a month ago, and what he said to me was that the number one thing we really needed to focus on, some kind of revolving fund to help repair housing that's in poor shape. And so I think that's one of the things that we are planning on. We always appreciate the opportunity to bring federal money into the state and leverage it as much as we possibly can. I understand, but I'm not an expert here, that there have been a number of barriers in using the rural development programs, but we would be happy to experiment with trying to work with rural development and with the farm community um, to bring those funds in. There's both an on-site farm labor housing program. I think that's been used more. And I think the off-site program has never been used in Vermont. And that may also go to um, the status of some of our farm laborers in terms of that.
Uh,
Um, so those are some of the barriers, but I think we definitely would like to move ahead on the repair side of things, and we would be happy to look at whether there's a way to help farmers use these resources. One of the issues I think with a loan program is, what happens to the housing if you don't have the circumstances of the farm change and you don't have the need for it for farm labor. And I don't think USDA looks kindly on leasing it out to people other than farm workers or retired uh, farm workers. So that's been one of the barriers. And under our statute, our fund, we're supposed to invest in housing that will be permanently affordable. And that sometimes causes people to say, well, we don't want your money in the deal because we want to be able to do something else with the property down the road. But having said that, and knowing that the governor's recommendation is quite large this year, and he wants us to focus on workforce among other things, and farm labor is absolutely part of our workforce, we would appreciate the opportunity to make that a part of the focus of our work in the coming year.
yeah.
Last thing I would say to you is we will need, as you know, we don't do this work. We work with community-based partners. So I've begun a discussion with the Champlain Housing Trust, which works in Franklin County and some in Addison County,
Well, I
about
think we
managing a
were
repair
going
program.
we
Go
were
ahead.
going to design this, Gus, for Orleans and Essex County, not Franklin and Chittenden County.
Well, I was
Bobby,
going
you
to
represent two Franklin County towns.
yes, I was going to remind him of that, and also say the other organization I've begun the discussion with is Rural Edge, which
Yeah.
obviously covers Orleans County.
Yeah,
So that would get us to the biggest farm counties. So we've begun that discussion. One of the things John said to me is this is an issue that really needs a champion. It's probably going to need outreach from the co-ops and support from them as well to make something good happen.
yeah. The Michael, did you want to run over a little bit about what you learned from your quick research that you dug up?
So, Gus this morning and Jen this morning, I talked with a staffer at USDA Rural Development's Vermont office, and she specifically does the rural housing and rural repair grant program, not the farm labor program. And she basically said that the rural housing and rural repair would not be ideal because one of the eligibility requirements of that is that the property is owner occupied, and that basically eliminates the ability to use tenants. But we started talking a little bit about the farm labor program, which she is not the most versed in, but she said gave the issue of the on-site, off-site. She referenced the fact that there is a citizenship requirement, but she said for the on-site program, they don't really run into that much in Vermont because they provide the assistance to the farmer, who's the owner of the farm. But I looking at the requirements right now, and the way that they define a domestic farm laborer requires citizenship or in the states legally. So I have to track down with the head of the Vermont Farm Labor Program that requirement. But one of the things that she did say is that nonprofit associations can apply for this assistance, and then use the money according to the criteria for the program. From what I'm looking at, the rules, that seems largely for the off-farm programs, for the off-farm housing, and then you have the citizenship issue again. So I think there's a little bit of a labyrinth that I need to figure out on how this could work. That's what I know.
I think the important thing, Michael, that you found out this morning is that, Gus, there is money available.
Yeah.
That's the important thing, that there's federal money available. And, so we could match it up with some of our money, and that would stretch everything out a ways. If any of you guys on the committee have questions, just Chris?
Michael, the owner occupied, you said you used a phrase that said something like the property. I guess, it seems to me that the property in many cases is owner occupied, but the building is probably not. And I just wonder if I'm hearing a distinction there, or that's just wishful thinking.
So I'm under the rural. I'm looking at the rural development single family housing direct home loan program, and this is for construction or purchase of a single family home. And one of the eligibility requirements is that the applicant needs to agree to occupy the property as your primary residence.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm at least thinking of repairs and upgrades.
Yeah.
Gus, when you conserve a farm, is there a discussion or a requirement around code at that moment?
There is not. Often the buildings are excluded from the easements, and there is not. I would say to you that in general, Vermont's approach to code enforcement is pretty lax, and I know lots of people don't like the heavy hand of government, but I think this is a place where, whether we're talking about on-farm housing or rental housing in general, we probably need a higher degree of oversight than we currently have across the state in all forms of rental housing, to help people focus on the things that they need to do to keep people safe.
Yeah. Gus, would you need any, if we were to pursue this, or if you were to pursue this, would you need any language changes or anything, or could you just, with your jurisdiction, move forward?
Well, in general, what I'd say is that we are, from the governor's proposal, we're already asking for some language changes. And I think the House has reacted, the other bodies reacted well to that, just for flexibility so that we can spend money in the conservation and agriculture areas. And I think in terms of, we may decide, but I think we have a little time to ask you for a little bit of language that would just give us some flexibility about running a repair program where we may not get permanent affordability and that kind of thing. So we may ask you for a change or two that would go with this special appropriation in order to stand up a repair program. But let us get back to you on that as an issue. And Jen, I think, has a thought on the language in front of
Hi, Jen.
now.
Good morning. Jen Holler with VHCB. VHCB doesn't require any authorizing language change, which this falls, within what we are authorized to do under our statute. But as Gus mentioned, there is the $20 million in one-time funding that the governor recommended as an increase for this year. And as the budget was submitted, it said that that was all to be for housing initiatives, but we've worked with the administration and committees on the House side on language that would allow us to use up to 5 million of that for conservation or farm viability program activities. And so we would hope when that bill comes over, the budget comes over to the Senate, that you might be able to ask the Appropriations Committee to support that. That said, if that funding comes through, that gives us the resources we need, and we don't need anything specific around farm labor housing, and that's our intention to do that. One other thought I had was that I know that when you were working with the CRF funds, you found a way to get some assistance to people who aren't documented or who might not qualify for the federal funds. But the beauty of the VHCB state dollars is that we will have the flexibility to help that housing regardless of the status of the residents there if we do set up a revolving fund. And then the last thing I'll mention is that the report that we've commissioned will be done on April 15th, just as a reference point, and can share it with you at that time.
And I don't know if it'd be helpful, but Linda has a copy of Dan Baker's report that she could forward you folks. And, you know, it's always most helpful if we don't have to do a lot of language change and all that. If we can, the important job, and I know Gus and we understand, is get the work done, get the job done and get the bases covered. But I feel that if we could get a bunch of this federal money to do some cost sharing, that it would make your dollars go a lot further, and we'd get more work done with less of our state dollars. And do you see nonprofits can apply for that? So could you apply for that, Gus, or would you have like Roll Edge and those people apply for it?
That's usually how it works, is that they're really in the communities and they're the direct interface with the people who are going to end up in the housing. So that's usually how we would do it. Rather, we could be the applicant, but I think it would be more effective if people who are not based in Montpelier but based out in your communities actually are the applicants for those funds. I do need to just give you a caution, and then I'll tell you what I hope the antidote is going to be, is that rural development is a pretty rigid agency. They're not usually very flexible. Before the Trump era, they had a director who was interested in granting waivers and doing lots of demonstration projects. So I'm hoping that now that we have a new secretary at USDA, we're going to get the same approach where they're going to want to do demonstration programs and they'll waive some of their rules. But if we go with the rules that are in place, there are reasons that these programs, and particularly the offsite program, has never been used in Vermont, that are hard to overcome. So it's going to take some of that kind of work to really pull those dollars in. I'm committed to trying to find a way. We actually got them for the first time anywhere to grant a waiver so that we could do replacement homes and mobile home parks on leased land. When Secretary Vislak was in office previously, they'd never done that before. But that's what it's probably going to take, that kind of creativity that we didn't have in the last 4 years to use that program.
And who does that, Gus? Do you lobby our congressional people to put something in the budget bill, or what avenue do you take to get the waiver?
Well, it's what I would call a conspiracy of goodwill. So there's a good idea at the community level. The congressional delegation might send a letter to the secretary or the head of the rural development office. last time around, Ted Brady was the state director, and he was interested in lots of experimentation. We don't know who the new state director is going to be, but if you get a good person in that job, it takes everybody just sort of saying, this is a great idea, let's give it a try. Um, uh, but we haven't had to have things in the federal budget bill to do that when we were able to get those waivers. We just needed somebody really willing to try something new.
Yeah, well, that's good. Chris?
Gus, you mentioned that this issue really needs a champion, and I have a feeling this might be it. I think the folks assembled here, I'm not sure where else we look for a champion. One of the programs, as I understand it, that exists already is a federal loan program. It's a low interest, 1% or something. Do you think, and I say this with the context that we're all trying to figure out more options, and smarter people than me are going to pull some ideas together. But one of them is that we would take that program and buy down so it effectively becomes a zero interest loan program for our farmers, or even though 1% is pretty darn low. Do you think you have the flexibility for that kind of approach, or is that part of this that's just going to have to be evolving as the budget moves forward?
Well, every farm is different, and as you know, some farmers are pretty cash crunched right now, given the state of the economy. So I think whenever you're asking somebody to take on more debt, even at 0%, it's a challenge, and I think that's why the chair is saying, can you put your money together with this so that further lowers the amount of debt that they need to borrow in total. So 0% is good, but if your cash flow is really tight, that's then investing in a new home can be difficult. In my experience, lots of farmers have been very happy to buy a used mobile home and say that's good enough. And I think that's a piece of why we're hearing that there's a real need for repair, because, if you buy an older home, you always have issues. And I think that just reflects the fact that, the price of milk is constricted. Some people have lost milk contracts. Other people are at the beginnings of their careers in agriculture. And it takes a lot of capital and to be a farmer these days. And people are pretty well leveraged. So I think that's just generally a big challenge. And I do think most farmers want their labor living on the farm or very close by.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So we kind of, or you talked about, and I think we kind of talked down in the other room that I'm in, about setting aside and giving you flexibility already on the Senate side with that 5 million. But we still want to do conservation things where it's a good deal for us, and stuff isn't getting any cheaper, even though doesn't seem to be a lot of money around them. And how much do you have any idea what we could even think about putting together for this little housing deal?
The budget numbers all changed pretty fast as the administration put its budget together. But I'm inclined to think that, a repair fund in the first year in the neighborhood of $500,000, and let's see how it goes. And I could be persuaded that it ought to be a little more, a little less. We don't want money just sitting in the bank. We want it to flow out.
No.
But that was my initial thought. But I haven't even proposed that to my board. I have mentioned that as a number to Secretary Tebbetts. So we want to get something started and see how we can make it work.
Well, we talked earlier before you came along, and we figured if we could get some federal match money to go with some of your money, you know, somewhere between 500 and $1 million, but yet make sure that you have the discretion of moving that back if things, you know, if they don't move along like they should, then you just go put it back into regular housing or whatever.
Yep. That sort of approach, you know, that's the sort of thing we would do. Is we don't want money sitting in
No,
our bank account. That doesn't do Vermonters any good. And so, but I thought, you know, if we get $500,000 on the street and it moves quickly, then you add to it. And if it is sitting there, maybe you pull some of it back. And we'll see what the take up is going to be.
yeah. And, you know, sitting in the bank though, with all that interest, you know, that 1.25%, you're really doing pretty good with it in the bank. Or somebody's
Well, the
doing
interest
good
rates have
with
gone
it.
down.
It's even lower.
Yeah, have gone down. But again, we always want the money back in the communities.
You're darn right.
That's where it does the most good.
Yeah, Jan?
Mr. Chair, when I was racing to make all my points earlier, it looked like Mike had a couple questions, and I want to be sure that Gus and I don't miss those if he has questions for us.
My only question was about whether or not you need flexibility in that 20 million for the Ready Fund, or to use any of that money for Ready, or is that going to be taken care of through your base
We
budget?
run that because we run that through the Farm and Forest Viability Program. The language says that we can use up to 5 million for conservation activities or Farm and Forest Viability Program activities. So that covers Ready. It could be more explicit, but our intent would be to expand that.
That's all I need to want.
And Gus, while you're with us, did we talk down in approach about doing your 275 for Ready on the fast track budget part, or did we not?
We didn't, and I don't think that that's necessary at this point. I think we're,
Okay.
you know, we're a little slower on Ready this year because the staff was so busy with the CRF program, helping farmers access those grants. So that's a second half of this year activity rather than the first half when they were focused on CRF.
Yeah. And to move this forward and to help the Farm Labor Housing Coalition people, should, you know, to let them know that there's going to be some movement on this, and should we get a letter from you, do a letter and send it to them?
Well, I traded emails with Mr. Caswell a couple days at the beginning of the week. He sent me one and I sent him one back. But I'd be happy to write you a letter and you could then share it with him, or write to him and write to you and copy him on it, and that'll do the. But if you want to do something more official, happy to brainstorm with you about it.
I don't really need to up here. Maybe Brian Campion would like a letter that he could put on the front page of the banner, helping him down in Bennington County. Him and Senator Sears have a little thing going about who gets above the fold in the paper. And so I'm just kidding. No, if you just do that, Gus, that would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else from any of the committee members? No. Did you have any questions for us, Gus, on any of the projects or issues? Anything we can help you with?
I think our key issue is just going to be the flexibility. And as we said, the other body seems to be supportive of that at the moment. But we wanted to make you aware of it. We were very grateful that not just did the House Ag Committee support flexibility, but the House General and Housing Committee also supported the flexibility. So there's a recognition that our rural communities need help, and through the viability program and the READY program, those are ways to help rural communities along with our conservation work. So,
Gus,
Yeah, well, we
and
certainly
did you
all,
want to add?
we certainly all have to work together to make the most of what we have.
Yeah.
If there are no other questions,
I think Jen had one other point to make.
I was just going to, in case it's helpful, just going to note that the fast track bill, the CRF bill, does have money, CRF money to be allocated to VHCB for housing. And I just want to clarify that that's specifically for housing the homeless related to the pandemic. We would not be able to use that funding for this particular purpose. And then the 20 million in one-time funding the governor recommended is for all that broader range of housing needs, whether it's home ownership or rental housing. And that's what we would be able to use for the farm labor housing. So just because there's multiple bills moving this year, I thought it may be helpful to make that distinction.
so that would be the July 1 funds, right?
The 20 million would be the July 1 funds, yes. And there's
And
CRF money in the fast track bill about to land in Senate appropriations. I don't know when you get back from town meeting break, that has money for housing, but that's very specifically for homelessness related to the pandemic.
yeah. And how long do you think it would take Gus or Jen for like Rural Edge or Champlain Housing or any of those groups to get geared up to try to get some federal money going?
I hope we'll be hard at work on it this summer.
So the July 1 date would not mess anything up then,
No,
because we want to get that federal money if we possibly can.
yes, we do.
Yeah. And so, and you're going to talk, you or Jen or somebody's going to talk to those groups, right? About working
will.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, I've already begun a discussion with both of them.
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
participate in that loose stakeholder group that Dan and Buster talked to you about. We're part of that group.
Yeah.
And they're aware of the
Well-
study coming too.
Yeah. Well, I think my day's going quite well.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and I hope the whole committee's day goes well and that you have a wonderful break next week.
Yeah, well,
I know everybody's been working hard, and I hope you can get away from Zoom at least a little bit.
won't that be a break? Well, thanks a lot, Gus and Jen, and you'll have a break with us out of town. So good luck to you.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay. Take care.
Yeah. So I think committee, isn't it strange how we do stuff and then the ag department comes right in and gets going on it? It's pretty good. We all get to pull in that buggy in the same direction there. We may get something done. But that, I think Gus has got a good handle on it, and Linda, you're going to send Gus that report.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Any other comments from anybody? I don't know if Baker, if we ought to get him tuned in so that he pushes the coalition to push to get stuff rolling, or
I mean, we've, as you just said, kind of stimulated the right discussion. I think for my money, we got to just keep an eye on it and not let it drop.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we'll review it then from time to time, check in with, of course, they aren't gonna do anything till July by the sound, but these housing agencies, they've got to start applying for some of this money, or it'll be gone and it won't be there. Anything, Michael, on your part that we need to think about or do or look at?
I can't think of anything. I'm still going to try to track down the farm labor person in Vermont, housing person in Vermont. But just looking at the rules, the federal rules for that, it's going to be hard. The nonprofit has to certify that it's going to comply with all the tenant housing requirements, and there's a citizenship requirement for that, and so it would be tough for that nonprofit to do that. And then are you basically, a significant portion of the farm labor community in Vermont might not qualify.
But
And
we talk about that, Michael, but I was reading this morning that down in freaking Texas, they've gone through and rebuilt whole apartment houses under farm labor housing. And,
well, that's the off-farm multi-unit program.
yeah, but that's more stringent, I thought you said.
It is.
And they're down there redoing whole blocks.
So I can't comment on how they're doing it, but I look at those rules and I'll still follow up. I think it's going to be difficult.
Well, that's Washington for you.
One thing, the seasonal employees that come on visas, they would still qualify. But you have to be in the United States legally.
And I thought earlier you said something to the effect that if the farmer is the owner of the property and it's only for farm labor tenant housing.
Right, there's the off farm where the nonprofit organization can be the applicant. But then there's the on farm where the farmer is the applicant.
Yeah.
And so the person I talked to this morning said that they just look at the eligibility requirements for the farmer.
Right.
Right.
And
so on farm might not be as much of an issue, but you're not going to be having the nonprofit being involved in that application.
But that's a loan.
But that's a loan.
so we got to figure out how to get around who's going to be doing the application to have on farm, because most of farmers like to have their veggie pickers, their the milkers, their sheep herders. They like to have them on the property if at all possible. So we got to figure out some way to fix these who's gonna apply for the money to fix on-farm properties?
Yeah, and you're gonna, I'm looking at what one of the requirements is for both programs. It's an occupancy restriction, and it says an eligible household must include a domestic tenant. That is a domestic farm laborer.
Yeah,
And so a domestic farm laborer is defined as meeting the citizenship requirement.
okay.
So I have to dig into this more.
Yeah, well, I think we certainly have time, but I was wondering from the other day when we decided to talk about this morning, if if a group like Farm Bureau or Rural Vermont or NOFA, or if those nonprofit groups like that would be interested in participating in helping out with with farm labor housing at all. And I just thought I'd run that by the committee, and Jackie or Maddie or some of them might be interested in helping to put this together to some degree. Brian and then Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. We all just got an email from Jackie Folsom saying that she's going to work with Vermont Farm Bureau to get the word out, whatever funding's available. So you can bet they'll be working on it.
Yeah. And Chris?
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. I think Gus was suggesting the co-ops as partner, but it's more in the vein of what Brian just said of telling folks what we end up doing rather than brainstorming with us. Although maybe to the extent they're watching, we clearly need the help. Michael, any sense of whether or not folks at the agency are also, this is complicated and hard enough that we haven't done it to date, right? So that always suggests to me it's not a new problem. We haven't focused enough to address it yet, but I wonder if, rather than only ask you to do the brainstorming, if there are folks that you might be aware of over at the agency that are looking into it. They've now stated this as something they're trying to work on as well.
I can always reach out. I'd probably start with Deputy Secretary Eastman and see where that goes.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that'd be smart.
Certainly, any help we can get from any direction. Like I said, the main thing is to get the work done, not play in the mud all day. Get out there and get it done. So anything else, guys?
All set.
All set?
Yeah.
Well, I think then we'll call it quits and see you at 11:30 on the floor. Chris, we better check with Linda to see if she's heard anything back.
Yeah, right.
I have not, so you might want to follow up on that.
Michael, you don't know anything about that stuff, do you?
I'm sorry, I was looking at an email. Could you repeat the question?
This is to get bill numbers for our 2 committee bills.
We have the bill numbers. We just, they came in late, and I think they're trying to get them on the calendar today, but not sure.
Do you know what they are, Linda?
S100 is the education bill, and S102 is the other one, the soil compost. Yeah.
So, what we want to do, Michael, is S100. it hasn't been posted on the calendar. And I think there's a motion that you can make prior to posting on the calendar. You stand up. I move that we move Ag Committee Bill S-100 to education for further review. We just needed that language to conform with our rules and regs and.
What? Yeah, Michael, it's not really a question for you, is it?
No.
It's basically you stand up and you move that the bill be committed to whatever committee you want it to be committed to. And Secretary Bloomer will be able to advise you when and how to do that.
Yeah.
Bobby, I'll call Bloomer right now, and we've got an hour, and I'll have him email you and I the specific language. I have a feeling it's suspending rules to pending entrance on the notice calendar, refer, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Does that
Yeah,
make
there
sense? I'm
isn't-
happy to contact Bloomer and get him to email you and I the language we need to use.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds good. So have a good hour off or